Taxes are the only certainty. Will 20% of people of society? And I have made it on my own in this world. Will not take care of time around a 2-year-old. I'm gonna start my own nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start my own nation with my self-preservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with my self-preservation. Well, let me talk a bit about the weather. You must admit it's not very clever. Don't get me wrong, it's not an anti-British song. Well, there is nowhere I would rather be wrong. I'm gonna start my own nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start my own nation with my self-preservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with my self-preservation. There are just a few things that I would like to say about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up, but you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start my own nation with my self-preservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with my self-preservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
Hello, everybody. There's a couple of people commenting on the song. That was my son's group from about 20 years ago. Listen to the bass guitar. He's the bass guitarist on it. That's why we can play it, because we don't have to pay anybody. And you'll see where he gets his musical ability from, because I'm going to sing now. This is my sandwich bar. No, it isn't. Nothing imaginary about this sandwich bar. That's a real tea towel of Nye Bevin, and that's my wife's real poster of Jeremy, my late wife's real poster of Jeremy Corbyn. And this isn't an imaginary counter in front of me. It's three very real and wonderful, down-to-earth socialist people who are going to talk about the issues of the day. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Hello, Jane.
Hello.
Hello, Laura.
Hello.
And I think we go straight through. Having said that, Alexis Sale's Imaginary Sandwich Bar this week is worth listening to. Really very good. Okay, moment of the week. Who shall I choose? Not Jane, because you're going first on the big story. I think After an absence of many, many weeks, I'm going to go to Laura. What was your moment of the week, Laura?
Well, I mean, I could give you a moment of the last 6 months. I think it's been since since I was last on the show. But I mean, I know other people are going to mention the election of Lula in Brazil, which is just huge. Congratulations! Like, really restored some hope for me. It was amazing. But I am going to choose another cracking example of how women in this country just say it how it is and are absolutely fantastic. I absolutely loved watching Rishi Sunak visit the hospital, where one of the patients there just absolutely tore a strip off him and told him, well, yes, they do a fantastic job here. You should probably pay them enough. And I just thought it was so lovely to see that. I mean, it's a bit crap watching Rishi's reaction to it. It's like, yeah, we are doing that. We are trying to. And, he'll leave that hospital and not give it a second thought, I'm sure. But it's just nice to know that people are willing to stand up for what's right and willing to do it to their face. And it was joyful to watch.
Absolutely. You are, however, a liar, Laura, because that was not your moment of the week. I've been watching Facebook and I
Yeah.
know what your real moment of the week was.
My non-political moment of the week was going to Rome, which I've always wanted to go, and it was just perfect. It was absolutely fun. Best thing I've ever done in my entire life.
Absolutely fantastic and well deserved, the two of you. I'm going to go to Paul. What was your moment of the week, Paul? I advise you very strongly to say going to Rome with my gorgeous wife.
It was absolutely incredible going to Rome. I've just been drawn to a few of the comments as well. Like, so Rome was absolutely amazing, and interesting. The political kind of side of that was they love water so much in Rome. They love like the clean water and the aqueducts and the fact that they take such pride in that, while our politicians seem absolutely adamant that they're going to fill ours with shit. It was quite a contrast really, and how important water is, and I think like we really need to think about that politically, how important it is to have clean, safe water to drink and for our our wildlife, agriculture, and all that. But there was a couple. Someone saying that am I Benjamin Button? That's because I've shaved for Movember today. It's Mark asking if I'm Benjamin Button. What this is this will tie into another one. Lawrence Mason has said, haven't I left the party? I mean, in the Labour Party in the huff. I think so. Well, I think that might be part of the reason why I'm regressing in age now, because the stress is gone. But I haven't left in a huff, but I have left the Labour Party given the fact that it's become completely undemocratic. So yeah, there's plenty of that. There's other shows on that, so you can go back and watch that. But please, by all means, think that I'm in a huff. I'm very, very happy. My moment of the week was, apart from Lula, which was absolutely incredible, is that the Tory member who crossed the floor to join the Labour Party, who called the Labour Party see you next Tuesdays in a WhatsApp message group, absolutely hates us on the left, campaigned against us, is now a Labour Party whip. So he has been given the ultimate gaslighting position of Keir Starmer, and I love this. Like, oh no, the Labour Party is going to be the best thing for not being a Tory. They are literally having Tories as the whip now in Parliament, like actual Tories, people who were Tories. This isn't me just saying I think they're Tories, like I'd say about Wes Streeton. This is like someone who actually was a member of the Tory party, was elected as an MP, and he is now a Labour Party whip. And over the country, we're having more and more people elected to Labour Party positions or becoming prospective parliamentary candidates who literally campaigned against Labour in 2019. Literally campaigned against them. So this is not like the Labour Party are coming back. This is the Labour Party are now not what the Labour Party are supposed to be. So I'm really glad to be gone.
Leanne she's left. She feels a weight's been lifted from her shoulders. I can understand that feeling. I love Neil Terry's comment, but other than water, sanitation, and aqueducts, what did the Romans ever do for us? Just God bless you, Neil. Just that mark of humour. God bless you. And Jane, this is where we're all shamed because your moment of the week is going to be so erudite and serious, and we've all been laughing about aqueducts. Go on, tell us what's the moment of the week that we all ought to have chosen, Jane.
So we shouldn't all have done, but I did want to. It's not my moment of the week, but I was really pleased to know the Amazon's going to be hopefully safe now from Bolsonaro, with Lula winning that election. So that's a huge relief. But I had a different moment of the week. So it's about the human rights charity memorial in Russia, set up in 1987 to speak out for the lives of everyone whose lives were destroyed in the Stalinist terrors in the Soviet Union. So I think there were 12 million victims, of those terrors, and Memorial during the time they've been around has managed to document some little scrap of the lives of 3 million of those people, just to prove that they existed and what happened to them, and some memory of them for their families. They were shut down by the Russian government earlier this year, but they won the Nobel Peace Prize a few weeks ago, and every year since they had been founded in 1987, they've done an annual memorial to all the victims, and they've read out the names of all the victims in different towns around Russia, and they still did it, even though obviously that's a very risky thing to do in Russia, and these are people who've been very openly protesting in Russia about the war in Ukraine, or the aggression in Ukraine. So I just wanted to mention that.
You've mentioned them before as well. Thank you for following them and keeping us updated about that. Just an ongoing tragedy in Russia, one of many. I should have started with you, then we could have finished up laughing about the aqueducts and gone on. But don't worry, people. As we go on tonight, it gets worse.
Now it's time for the big story.
Now, tonight's big story is 2 for the price of 1, because tonight's big story was going to be tonight's big story and second story, but they sort of coalesced in a most disgraceful way earlier on. So what we'll do is we'll start talking about Cruella for a while, and just talk about her and her position, and then we'll perhaps move on and deal with some of the things that she's been saying about immigration and what the issues are there. Jane, what I notice is that today the Tories have suspended Matt Hancock for going on a television program, and yet they allow this woman to come back and be the Home Secretary. How has that happened?
Well, they're just reshuffling the same awful group of people who've been on the front benches governing this country for the last 12 years, running it into the ground. But I'm feeling quite, not conflicted is the wrong word right now. I'm quite scared about the direction we're going in. The language that Suella Braverman's using is frightening. It is fascistic. It's disgusting. Some of the things she's saying, and Priti Patel wasn't any better before her. Many of those people have said very dangerous things on our government benches. But at the same time, I'm really mindful of the fact that the left have been demonized very wrongly by the mainstream media and the right of the so-called left and Conservative MPs for quite a few years now. And there's been death threats made to left-wing MPs like Jeremy Corbyn, the murder of Joe Cox, and it's the dehumanizing of people. And I've just become quite aware lately that the anger I'm feeling against the Tories for the disgusting things they're saying, for the way they're putting people's lives at risk. I'm reading comments on Twitter that I think, yes, and then I read it and I think, actually, if that was said about a left-wing MP, and of course they wouldn't have done something that disgusting disgusting in the first place to have warranted that anger. But I'm really feeling confused about how to channel the anger in the right way. Are we in danger of dehumanizing them? I know that's not the big danger and the main point here, but I'm finding I'm feeling quite confused and frightened about these things right now.
I mean, one of the things I noted was that Priti Patel, there was I saw a thread of tweets, and one of the Tory MPs had gone on saying that he was horrified by the language that Cruella was using, and that he sort of wondered if anything could be done. Priti Patel came on and said, yes, she agreed, and watch this space. So when we have a Tory Home Secretary who is really outraging Priti Patel by how awful and right wing she is, I mean, you really have scraped the bottom of the barrel. I mean, I was on Facebook today with one of my former pupils, and they was wondering what Suella Braverman has over Rishi Sunak, that he actually appointed her and now continues to defend her despite the hot water that she's getting in. I mean, sort of she was sacked because, no, she didn't. She resigned because she broke the ministerial code. She shared private public documents on her private email. He appointed her nonetheless, and now he is hanging on to her. I mean, I'm sure that she doesn't have some blackmail over Rishi Sunak, but sort of why, Jane, do you think that the Tories continue to support this woman, given everything that's happened?
I wonder if there are very few people who are really very happy about being prominent supporters of this current Prime Minister and the assortment of people that he's been working with on the front benches for the last few years. So I wonder if that's part of it, or perhaps it's just hard to find people with standards so low that they'll do terrible things that you need them to do. So she's an easy bet. But I wanted to just go back what I was saying before, because I realise it's probably a bit annoying and insulting for a lot of people on the face of it. But I think what it comes down to for me is that for quite a few years, there was a lot of hope that we could channel into, and there was a feasible alternative on the table that we could channel our feelings into. And that seems to have disappeared now. We haven't got people sitting on front benches of the opposition saying what should be said. What needs to be done is there needs to be a voice of reason countering the disgusting things they're saying. And I think the opposition's being extremely weak on that. And I think because of that, we're left without the hope option, and I'm worried that we're just disappearing into a spiral of hopelessness, and we need a different direction on this. We need the opposition to be taking a stand and making it clear that this is not acceptable to talk like this.
Thank you. I mean, the truth is that so often on so many things, and immigration being one of them, the Labour Party seems to be trying to out-Tory the Tories in what they say. Paul, I mean, let's move on to immigration. I mean, what is particular? Just explain to the people who are listening why the language she's using is so particularly dangerous and horrific.
I'll allow Nick Griffin to do that. So earlier on today, as part of my research into what's going on, I decided to have a look at the 2010 BNP manifesto, which is something I mentioned last week. And there's a little bit in it, and there's a bit about, ignore the bit about Afghanistan, but it says, the BNP is proud to campaign on a number of issues which set it apart from all other political parties, namely the conflict in Afghanistan, the immigration invasion of our country, the threat to our security posed by Islamism, and the danger of the European Union to our sovereignty. Now, I would argue that that is now a mainstream political party stance. I think the Conservative Party are there. We've seen Tony Blair say that some types of Islam are incompatible with Britishness, I believe, that he was once quoted as saying. We've had the Labour Party allow Trevor Phillips to say things about Islam and then be readmitted to the party. So, these things, these kind of Islam kind of rhetoric is there. It's quite clear. And the fact that they're using the term invasion. Remember, we had this in the build up to the EU elections just before Joe Cox was murdered. They were talking about swarms and things like that. And David Cameron was talking about swarms at one point as well. And what seems to has happened is that rather than people saying, look, I've got my opinions and they're pretty rigid, and then someone else has got their opinions and they're pretty rigid, and the political class trying to say, well, actually, we're going to try and have to keep these two people happy, we'll be centrists and we'll go through the middle. I think that's what they think they're doing in theory. What they're actually doing is they're saying, I'm hearing a lot of this in the media, in the billionaire-owned media, and I'm hearing Rupert Murdoch saying things about he doesn't really like people who are Muslims, so therefore we're going to invade Iraq, things like that. And it seems that the centrist opinion is just simply swayed by media rhetoric. And I think that's what's happened, and everything's become really, really mainstream. And these things that we found the BNP abhorrent in 2010 when Nick Griffin went on Question Time and they exposed themselves. Even the people who were very, very vocally supportive of what the BNP had been saying suddenly went away and they went, I don't want to be associated with this guy. Now he'd be in cabinet, with his opinions. Maybe not him personally, but with his opinions. The other issue with Sir Willa Braverman is one of the things she's been accused of is the things that she leaked were supposed to be sensitive financially. So they're meant to be financially sensitive things. So what she told people and what she sent to people was something that maybe someone could make a lot of money out of. And this appears to be something that is very important to the Conservative Party. You've got Rishi Sunak, who has made a lot of money in financial institutions. You've got Jacob Rees-Mogg's dad wrote about how you crash economies in order to make money personally. And you've got this particularly destructive Tory willing to make money for their donors at any cost. And I think we need to think about how those things are linked, how this anti-immigrant rhetoric is linked. It's kind of playing to this populism, but I think they really do believe it. And then at the same time, they just want to look after rich people. It's an appalling situation to be in. It is utterly, utterly bleak, and we need to understand this and come together and fight it.
Thank you. That it is bleak. What you said is incredibly bleak. But I say to people, I learn something every time I talk to these people, and that is true. And it's frightening that the BNP manifesto in the noughties has now become. Well, some of those have actually come to pass, haven't they? We've left the EU. We're talking about an invasion of immigrants. Let's talk about immigration for a while, Laura. I mean, is it as bad as they're trying to crack on? Is it an invasion?
Of course it's not. Of course it's not. If you look at the numbers over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, Germany's taken 3 times as many as the UK has. France has taken double. Obviously, people say, well, if they can go to France and Germany, why would they need to cross yet another piece of dangerous water to get here? And the fact of the matter is, everybody is in a different circumstance. If I landed in Germany, I can't speak German. I don't know anybody there. I don't know the culture. A lot of these people who do come here do know people here. They have family here. They speak English. Why would you not want to come here? But the fact that we're talking about how we've got this influx of migrants who are just taking over all of our services and leaving us with nothing is just factually inaccurate. And I think we need if we're looking at this in terms of a political structure, we need to have a look at how the language is structured. Obviously, we talked about the words they use, but also the way their speeches are structured. I was watching Suella Braverman's speech about this after the attack on the migrant holding centre. And I was it's the way they phrase things as fact that are clearly opinion. And it's working really well because it is delivering a message to the people that this is true, this is happening. So, for example, she said, it's not bigoted to say we have too many asylum seekers abusing our system. I'd argue that is quite bigoted. But she's obviously made a statement there, so it must be factually correct. And she goes on to say it's not xenophobic to suggest rapid migration places pressure on the housing, public services, and community relations. The fact that she's even mentioned community relations there is a way to bolster her support in this arena and a way to get the members of the general public thinking about community and how this is destroying our community. And actually, we've seen over many, many decades that the reason the UK is what it is because we've had these people come from other countries to develop our culture and our working practices and our hospitals, our doctors, our nurses, our teachers, our people who work in Asda, everybody who is important in our society. There is a massive, massive section of those communities that have come from other countries. So she's clearly trying to perpetuate that divide there between people who don't belong here, in air quotes for those on their podcast.
Don't belong. You don't belong.
Exactly.
I mean, I went on Facebook today, and as I was telling you before the show, and just called it out for dog whistle politics that it is. It's just designed to get a whole section of the community bouncing up and down, barking at shadows, and it worked. I got one of them on my Facebook feed, just talking utter awful xenophobic drama. Let's deal with a couple of the things. Paul, this canard about the ought to go to the first safe country. Answer that for my dickhead.
Okay. There are many, many reasons why someone might want to come to Great Britain. Also, geographic proximity to a country. It's not exactly fair to say, well, actually, you're the closest, so therefore you should take every single one. Like, that would, if we happened to be the closest, like, I don't know, like, if the UK did a genocide in Ireland again. Oh, hang on. Did I just say that? So the UK, imagine if, like, the royal family decided that they would starve the people of Ireland and they had to move. Should all the Irish people have to move here? Well, yeah, of course, probably. But, it's perhaps a bad example. If someone else had gone to war in Ireland, should we have to take every single person from Ireland because of geographical proximity? Well, no, I don't think anyone would argue that. There's also a responsibility there. A lot of the people have been displaced because of wars that we've been involved in. We are supposed to take pride in the fact that we can be a safe haven for others. And because Great Britain has had an empire, a lot of people want to come here because they actually have a great deal of respect and love for Great Britain, and they want to come and live here and make their families here. A lot of them speak English. It's a really good idea for them to want to come here. So that is why we're that's why that argument's quite nonsensical, really. People do want to come here for a variety of reasons.
Laura?
Yeah, just before it passes me by, just touching on something Paul said there about the reasons to be proud to be British. This is something else that you mentioned in our speech, that with all of this traffic coming from other countries, we're losing sight of the core values and culture that made Britain a great place to live. And she doesn't go on to clarify what those core values and what our culture is, or what she believes our culture to be. But she's again pushing that myth that people coming in from outside don't get what Britain's all about. We do, and our sovereignty and Great Britain and all of that. But actually, I think most people would agree that our inclusivity, our kindness, our ability to create safe spaces for people is something that makes us great. And she's just completely not given any context.
This is the
or
point.
any.
This is the point.
Exactly.
Jane, deal with this second nonsense that he came up with, my dickhead came up with, sort of that these aren't asylum seekers, these are strong young men, and they're economic migrants. Economic migrants, they're not asylum seekers.
It's a bit of a silly argument, really. I I mean, often the young men come across because the journey's very dangerous, and often the young men themselves are subject to abuse, horrific physical abuse, and terrible conditions, just trying to make a journey to safety because they're in fear of their lives to try to get to somewhere where they can then hopefully try to get the rest of their family without the more potentially vulnerable members of their family having to make that same journey in the same way. And if you were really an economic migrant, would you really put your life at risk? Would you really get into one of those little boats and go across across the English Channel at night? It's
Done a better
terrifying.
job.
Yeah, I mean,
I
but
don't like being a teacher. I'll get in a boat and
yeah,
fish the channel.
I
I'm sure
think
I
it's
can make a
difficult
better
though.
living being a cleaner
Yeah,
in England.
yeah.
Sorry.
Well, it's just so hard because it's so easy to be frustrated and dismissive of those arguments. But I think looking at what's happened in Dover with the firebomb attack on the centre there at the weekend, and the situation in Manston, um, the horrific conditions that the asylum seekers there are living in. But I think it is important to remember there's really high levels of deprivation in these areas. A lot of people have been just kicked in the teeth repeatedly by life living in these areas, and I think it does make people more vulnerable to being manipulated by people, trying to point the finger at someone else. And this government seriously needs to distract from the fact that their policies have willfully plunged people into abject poverty throughout the country, and to a large
Paul.
extent in those areas.
Paul.
The other argument here is like, why does it? Like a lot of people have said this in the chat. Why does it matter if someone's an economic migrant? Like, if someone moves into your town or village, into your street or whatever, do you go, hey, dear me, they've only moved here to be economic migrants. They've got a job in the local school. Look at them economically migrating into my town. It's preposterous. To be honest, it's not even like, these people are refugees and what have you, but and that is something that we need to be looking at to protect people. But why are they giving labels to, like, a migrant's just someone who moves? If there weren't lines drawn on a map that were borders, then would people really be interested in that? Because there isn't a border of a town where, oh, you've got to go and sign some paperwork to be in a different town. And no one complains about economic migrants going from town to town, do they? Or did they? I don't know. I've never really heard anyone.
They hate people from Ferry Hill. Talk to me, Paul, about this firebomber and what it's all about. Somebody sort of was saying on the chat that it's not being classed as terrorism. Actually, it is now. It's being investigated as terrorism. I hear on the news tonight. Talk to me about this and. I really didn't get why it was significant and what was going on. Can you explain it to people?
So obviously the rhetoric in the press has been anti-immigrant for a very, very long time. I don't know whether this was directly triggered by something that's been said in Parliament lately, or whether this is someone who's been building up for a long, long time, like the guy who came to Finsbury Park to Mosque to try to kill Jeremy Corbyn a couple of years ago. Like someone who'd been radicalised over time. The problem you've got here is someone went along with some petrol bombs, which I think they referred to as crude incendiary devices or something like that. They mean petrol bombs. And he's went with a couple of petrol bombs, thrown them at an immigration detention centre where there are staff there who are... so injured a couple of staff, thankfully not very seriously injured, but injured more than anyone deserves to be at work. The people who are in those detention centres as well are in really, really difficult conditions. And I think the fact that they didn't immediately think that someone who was going and throwing petrol bombs at a place was not a terrorist. Like, why is that so obvious to us that that's a terrorist act? And yet other people, we're not investigating for terrorism. And then they had to have a bit of a public outcry and then go, oh, it might be, we thought because he wasn't brown that that it might not be terrorism, but we think it might be terrorism now because we've learned that white people can be terrorists too. That's literally what it's got to be. It is so clearly an act of terror. But the problem was, against the backdrop of what you went in, there's someone who's from our CLP who's written the book, the literal Labour Party book on immigration, who'd just tweeted something about, oh, there were no migrant crossings before 2018. The Conservatives have lost control of people in boats. There were no recorded crossings. Well, one thing, they only started recording them in 2018, so that was why there wasn't one. The other thing, dog whistle racism. And I'm really sorry because this is a guy we actually know and we've met before. And he's so in Keir Starmer's pocket. And obviously, you saw like quite a few similar Labour Party tweets going out. Like the Labour Party had decided, you can see them, they all tweet a very similar thing at the same time. And that was the Labour Party line. They were trying to outflank the Tories to the right. We'll deal with these nasty people in boats better than the Tories will. And that's the backdrop you've got of this. And then this terrorist attack happened, and all of a sudden people are like, oh, are we inflaming this? I don't even know whether they have the self-awareness to think that, but it didn't look very good. So that's the significance for me.
Laura, is it Marston or Manston? And talk to me about why is that in the news at the moment?
I think it's Manston. I
Right.
think.
Jane knows. Jane knows. I should have asked her.
It's
So
down the road from here.
she's the brain box. Tell us all about it, Laura, anyway.
But yeah, essentially, it's kind of like a holding place for people, and they're only supposed to stay there 24 hours. So migrants coming over get checked, do paperwork, things like that, and then they're supposed to get moved into a hotel or somewhere safer, more comfortable. But when I want to say, is it Jepson, the Tory MP? I've probably got his name wrong.
Jenrick,
that's that fella. Jenrick. I know he's annoyed me for other reasons before, but he was chatting about it, and he brought it to light on one of the politics programs and was just saying that we realise we need to do something about this. You know, it isn't okay. And I was like, do something about what? These people have been there for 4 weeks, and not only is it just like a bit of a hovel, there's no beds there. They were having blankets on a cold floor, and just left.
4,000 of them instead of 1,000. 4 times as many as should have been there as well.
It's just, I mean, it's barbaric. You wouldn't treat anybody like, well, you shouldn't treat anybody like that. But again, what happens then is they get moved to hotels, and then the local people get stirred up about, hey, well, there's bloody immigrants in the hotel down the road, and then that starts that whole process again. And I just wonder how these people manage to stay, keep fighting for a better life and think that this is the better option. I mean, to think that this is the better option, people need to have a good word with themselves if they've got a problem with them. That being treated that badly is better than where they've come from, because it must be bloody awful over there. And, we haven't talked yet about how actually the majority of the problems that these people are suffering within their own countries is usually as a result of something we've done. So it is our responsibility to help them. Absolutely. We shouldn't be selling arms to all these countries. We shouldn't be, forcing people to go to war. We're making these people's lives a misery, and it is up to us to help.
Jane, last word on this. Is there a solution in our lifetime?
Yeah, if the will's there, if people like us keep on trying, keep on talking to people, keep on working towards it. We need safe routes, don't we? Safe routes for people to get here, to claim asylum. We've got this huge crisis in the NHS that we're short of, is it 50,000 nurses? We haven't got enough GPs. We could have a really lovely inclusive society where we just all work together, to try and I think going back to when I was born, 40% of the housing stock in the country was council housing, affordable council housing. It was 9% a few years ago. That's why there's not enough housing. If we had a government with the will to provide adequate resources for the population with, the money that we're all paying into the system, and, there would be plenty for everyone, but they're ideologically driven to run down public services and keep on telling us there's not enough for everyone. So it's definitely possible to do things a better way. We came so close not very long ago, and I definitely think we can get there if we just keep on trying.
I mean, we need a humane system. I think. But we need an efficient system. It is just wrong that we imprison effectively people for 3 years. We won't let them work. We won't give them a pittance to live on, appalling conditions, keep them in prison for 3 years with a system that just eventually decides whether we're going to let them stay or not. That needs speeding up. And I'm not foolish enough to think that everybody who crosses the channel in the boat sort of is an absolute valid asylum seeker. But what we need is a system which finds out promptly and efficiently and deals with people in a kind and humane way. It's appalling what's going on. And I know that people are saying that it wasn't invented just after 2018, but 9/10 of this is just a typical Tory creation, that they do nothing, they do nothing, they do nothing, they talk, they talk, they talk, they do nothing, they do nothing, and then suddenly it's a crisis and they're trying to set everybody at each other's throats to sort it out. Just horrific. Anyway, let's move on. Other stories. Paul, I'm worried about the strikes. I think it's all beginning to fall apart. Talk to me. Do you share my fears, or are you still upbeat about what's going on, particularly the postal strike? I'm worried about. Talk to me about the situation with people's attempts to protect their pay and their conditions at work.
In what way do you think it's fallen apart? Sorry.
I'm just worried about the fact that the Royal Mail is now talking about, is it 30,000 or 10,000 jobs? I think it's 10,000 job cuts that they're going to make. They clearly have no intention, and the rail company as well, no intention of discussing at all or coming to any kind of agreement. I'm just worried about the way it's going. Are you less worried than me? But please share, because I trust you much more than I trust me.
So I'm really worried about the privatised Royal Mail. I'm really worried about the way they behave. Food bank fillers, they call them, because his employees have to use a food bank. But yeah, I worry about that they're not going to be moved by, but they were never going to be moved by this. Like, good bosses don't get their staff going on strike. They were terrible bosses anyway. So you're talking about something else here. You're talking about public opinion, and public opinion is with Royal Mail. The Royal Mail staff, not the Royal Mail management, not the company. I think most people in this country would want a public sector Royal Mail, because it makes sense to have that. I think most people would agree with that, and I think the political opinion will sway. Now, I've seen Chris Bryant, who isn't exactly on the left of the Labour Party, put it that way, standing up and blaming management, and it's quite interesting. The language that you're using is very similar to what I suggested they should use to Angela Rayner a couple of months ago when I did a thing with her. The way the Labour Party are talking about these strikes is now changing. We've seen a candidate who's on the extreme right wing of the Labour Party in Sedgefield standing on a picket line this week for the CWU. Now, if they think that's the way the wind's blowing, that is very, very interesting to me. The Labour Party MPs and the Labour, I don't think they're ideologically with those striking workers, but I think they're seeing it's a popular movement, and therefore they're starting to want to associate themselves with that popular movement. Now, as cynical as that is, and as cynical as a position to take, I'm happy about that, because that means the workers are making a difference, and those workers have the support, and that's where I believe the strength of the workers is at the moment. That people aren't really believing this militant, nasty worker rhetoric that's been going on for years, and the sooner people understand that it's always the fault of management whenever someone goes on strike, the better it will be for all of us. So yeah, there's some encouraging signs there.
Laura, talk to me about, because you're much closer than me, of course. Talk to me about what's going on, and because there's a number of strikes. There's and it's not just the CWUs, it's the RMT and other people are talking about coming out. Tell us
Yeah.
about that.
Well, I think it's really interesting. I think the RMT have sort of lit the touch paper here. I think that really did set everybody off, and I think Mick Lynch has done just such a fantastic job of getting public support on this, and it is the public support that we need to be able to make this work, like Paul said. So there's, the RMT, the CWU, ASLEF, TSSA, there's absolutely loads. And now the education unions are balloting. So both NEU and the NASUWT have sent ballots out. Their ballot closes towards the end of December, end of October, I think. No, November. You think I'd know that? I work there. But also some of the smaller teacher unions and even the head teachers union are considering doing it as well. I think, once they go out, I've seen some sort of there was like a hierarchy of public support for the different unions. So the barristers were right at the bottom. And like RMT was right at the top. So I think it shows you the public opinion is very sort of, I guess, traditionally working class. There is a misconception that barristers already get paid a lot of money and so don't need it. But that is a misconception. They don't get paid very much at all and definitely should be out. But the support, like even the lowest one, even the barristers got like 35, 36% of those asked were in support. So the tide has turned, I think. I think the anti-trade union legislation that the Tories brought in is gonna be challenged and needs to be challenged at every stage, and it should be something that we've never even let go. And we think we've dropped the ball on this one massively in terms of sort of the left wing. I can't use the word we when I talk about the Labour Party anymore because I have left. But I do still consider myself left wing, and I am hopeful that the Labour Party will return to being left wing. We're the people that need to be, banging the drum for trade unions because that is where our strength lies. Our strength lies in numbers. And that's again why things like Unite Community is so important, because working doesn't mean you go out 9 to 5 and get a paycheck. I'm a firm believer that stay-at-home mums work bloody hard, that carers who care for the family members just need a decent wage.
That was very heartfelt, Laura. Very, very heartfelt, that last comment. Sort of.
Yes, well, I work and look after them, so like it's just bonkers. You can't do anything right if you're a mum, though. You can't do right if you go to work and you're a mum. You can't do right if you stay at home and you're a mum. You can't. Everything you do is wrong. So you definitely should be remunerated for that. I think in some way.
Jane, do you think that we're winning on the strikes? Do you think that we're beginning to make headway for working people?
Hope so. It does seem like the attitude has turned a bit. It seems like so many people are so badly impacted now that there's a bit more of a general consensus amongst the population. I just think it's harder for the mainstream media to sneer at these things because of the level of public support. They tried very hard, and I think they gave airtime to Mick Lynch originally, didn't they? And then promptly stopped doing that when they realised how popular he was becoming with people. So I hope so. I'm cautious because this is just such a relentlessly awful government, and they've got no standards whatsoever. But I think we've really got to stick in there and try.
Paul, do you see enough as an alternative political movement, or simply as an organ for the accomplishment of the strikes?
I think it depends what you mean by a political movement. There's a big thing that Parliament is the only political body we have, or local government and things like that. But most of the political change actually comes from the fringe. it comes from extra parliamentary things. And as I said earlier on about people within the Labour Party now having to side with the people on strike, where that wasn't really the position of the Labour Party a few weeks ago, that came because of external pressure, and that became because of the political, the political momentum behind movements like Enough is Enough. So whether Enough is Enough becomes its own political entity is a different argument as to whether that is a political movement, because it is a political movement. Whether they decide to stand candidates in Parliament is a totally different thing. Like, is Parliament completely rotten from the core? Is that something that can't be changed? Is that something that people aren't interested in working within? You saw like UKIP made one of the biggest changes in UK politics imaginable by never having an MP. Well, they got one, but they never had one elected to Parliament by enough people voting for them. So change comes from the outside, and now we see everyone speaking the language of the BNP and UKIP, and they didn't have electoral success really in the way that most people would define it. So yeah.
A number of interesting comments about Enough is Enough. I think we have to win this. That I see it as part of a wider movement of capitalism to depress the workforce further and further into a cheaper and cheaper factor of production, and I think it's a battle that we have to win if we're not going to be further impoverished and oppressed. Whatever ways is enough. Just very quickly, our last thing, Laura. Elon Musk has taken over Twitter. Good thing or bad thing?
Oh God, awful thing. I mean, not that Twitter was particularly pleasant in the first place, but yeah, he was meant to buy it back in March, but then tried to leave that deal. But Twitter held him to account and said, "No, you've got to go through with this." And now he's celebrating the fact that he called himself, I think he's Chief Twit is how he describes himself on Twitter now. So he's trying to do the whole I've got a sense of humour, and everybody's talking about, oh my God, he's so clever, he does really well, he's got amazing businesses, he's CEO of so many things, he's so rich. No, he's just rich. He feels to me like he's a collector, almost a collector of things that will build his profile, a collector of trophies, and Twitter is his most recent one. And I've seen a few interviews he's done about it, and he's kind of pushing the idea that he's a free speech absolutist. He wants to make sure everybody has their say, and he thinks the only way to sort of define whether we have free speech is that if somebody you don't like is allowed to say something that you don't like, then we've got free speech. And I mean, in some respects, I can see that argument absolutely, but there's got to be a line. There's got to be when it becomes criminal, when it becomes so hurtful that it is damaging, when it is slanderous. There's an argument that he will now let Donald Trump back onto Twitter, and everybody's got his open arms about this. And he talked about this, I think it was yesterday, actually, it might have been today. But his comeback was really interesting. He said, actually, the people who support Donald Trump haven't gone anywhere. They've followed him to his new social media space, and they're all stirring the pot together over there. Wouldn't it be better to have them all together here where everybody is, so we can all see what's going on and we can all have a discourse with each other? I don't know how much I believe there is sort of genuine care for that, but it was a good argument. I'll give him that. But it all sort of feels like he wants to be the moderator of society. It feels like the start of like a really terrifying dystopian trilogy that we're all queuing up to watch, and it's going to have some really awful ending where the rich guy takes ultimate power. It is such a weird. I do feel like we've been sucked into the matrix. Something's gone wrong here. It just doesn't feel right. It feels really strange that one man can have so much power.
That was just fabulous, Laura. Thank you very much. I was entranced while you were speaking. That was just wonderful. Thank you. Jane, should we worry? Should we worry that he's letting all these? He's sacked a lot of employees as well. I can't remember which teams he's sacking, but sort of he's letting go of the reins. He's letting people just talk. I mean, do we need to worry about this? Is this a dystopian? The first episode of a dystopian trilogy.
I did think what he said about free speech, it did sound good. But like you said, I think he's reducing the workforce by 75%, down to, I think, about 2,000 people. And actually, what happened to Paul a few weeks ago really made me think about this, because if you look at the tweets Paul put out, you look at the vile barrage of comments, and I reported some of them, and apparently they didn't violate Twitter, but even alone, but certainly together, they were so abusive and nasty and vile. And there's no algorithm that's going to pick up a series of tweets like that. So I think, I don't know, I just think it's a very hostile area, Twitter, isn't it? And you can't isolate abuse down to one tweet that's used the right words and phrases. There's an awful lot of abuse going on there that it isn't picked up currently, and I think that reducing the staff down to a skeleton and then relying on algorithms, I don't know, free speech is one thing, but the abuse on there is not nice, and that does concern me. That it's really hard, because however you look at it, you're thinking you've got people making subjective choices about what they think is okay. It is very difficult to put down fast rules about, how it should work, but I certainly don't think an algorithm is going to do it.
Do you not worry that Twitter is becoming a kind of a cauldron of fascism, which is influence? It isn't just that people go in and influence Twitter, then Twitter in turn influences people who are listening. Do you not fear that it's a breeding ground of hate and extremism?
It's an echo chamber, because the fact that I can't follow more people I'm following now means I only follow people who think the same thing as me. I used to follow more people to see their views, but now I think, well, I'll follow back this nice person who's following me. So I see even narrower vision. So
Laura, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just on that. So he's been talking about free speech and how we need to hear from everybody. But the main group that he's talked about getting rid of is radical left lunatics. So he's mentioned the right wing and how it can be nasty, but radical left lunatics are the ones you really got to watch out for.
I suppose that's us, really, isn't it?
I think so.
Paul, last word on this. My CLP chair wants us to stop. We put out things on our website, and we put out things on Instagram, and we put out things on Facebook, but we also put out tweets on Twitter, and she wants us to stop doing that. She wants us to boycott Twitter as a protest against what's happening there and the takeover by Elon Musk. What do you? I mean, I say if there's somewhere evil, then people who are good have got to hold the ground as long as they possibly can and stay on it. What's your view? Should we be boycotting Twitter?
I think people need to think about their own mental health in this one. But I wouldn't necessarily just vacate it for the sake of vacating it. Like, all social media has its drawbacks. Twitter can be full of very, very nasty people. It can also be full of bots, which is a very interesting thing to say. Like, a lot of people will say the exact same thing at you, and it's really interesting that they might be from a Russian bot farm, or not necessarily Russian, just a bot farm somewhere. They might be paid to do those things. And that is certainly the case. Like, I think I experienced a little bit of that, where people were saying the exact same things at me. So if you can stand it, if you can stand the heat, then do so. If you're not feeling very well mentally, then I don't think Twitter's a very healthy environment. I put out a tweet the other day, and it was something along the lines of, has anyone ever changed anyone's mind by being horrible to them? And that seems to be like what happens on Twitter. They're just like, I disagree with you, so therefore I'll be horrible. And has that anyone ever changed anyone's mind? It's not healthy dialogue, was my point. And I don't think that's the point. And someone pointed out to me that it's more about the Twitter lurkers. So it's the people who are reading the responses. they're trying to gauge what public opinion is, and some of those people will, I'll go with the majority. And I think that's what they're trying to influence. They're just trying to say, well, if there are 1,000 comments saying the exact same thing and 300 comments saying the opposite thing, I'll go with the 1,000. I think that's the mentality behind it. But like what Jane and Laura have both said as well about free speech, it is interesting that like the people who really advocate for free speech are the ones who definitely don't like it when free speech is used back at them. Like I'm entirely for free speech. Say whatever stupid thing you want to say, and be prepared to feel our wrath afterwards and take it. So if someone wants to say something horrible about trans people, like J.K. Rowling likes to do, then expect people to say, "That's horrible, J.K. Rowling." Like, you know, that is how free speech works. It's not one way or the other. You know, if someone says something stupid, that should not go unchallenged. And I think that's where the likes of Piers Morgan, who's very much for free speech until some sort of free speech is directed at him, and then he's like, oh, you know, these like people who call everyone else snowflakes. That's the world you're dealing with, and I think that's what Elon Musk's talking about. These nasty leftists saying nasty things about him, because you know what? Elon Musk's a good guy. He's a self-made man. He managed to get he's managed to be as successful as he is with simply a small inheritance of an emerald mine. You know, like, who doesn't inherit an emerald mine? And he's gone on to do these amazing things by, like, you know, manipulating other people's ideas and investing in their ideas and using the talents of other people. What a guy. Let's all applaud Elon Musk.
And on that note, we of sarcasm, we finish. You have been fantastic, people. I love it when we have guests on, and it's so exciting. We're all so honoured, but when I see you, the team, my heart leaps. So you're my favourites. Don't tell anybody. We'll keep this. Thank you for listening, everybody. In a moment, I'm going to shut up and let Paul Twitter on for a while. I'm going to let Paul Facebook Live on for a while. But just to say, wonderful comments. I'm sorry I didn't make more of them. I could have spent all night reading them out. Thank you for listening to us. I'll let Paul talk and then we'll all say goodbye.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to do some really, really important things. Look for the Independent Media Association and look for our members. We're a member of the Independent Media Association. We don't push this enough. Unity News, who've been in the comments, are also a member of the Independent Media Association. There's some really interesting stuff that I've very nearly said about Suella Braverman that we know to be true about the relationship she has with Sunak, but we don't think it's verified yet. So I need to double check why that thing is. But like, you know, that having these media contacts, having these group of people who are all independent people trying to do the right thing, trying to get news out in a good way. Milk the Cow, another absolutely massively brilliant source for your news. Go there and go and find out about these independent media sources. It's really important. If you can donate to us, or the Prisma, we love the Prisma as well, and check them out for international news and especially to do with South American news and all that. Really, really good. So
and Alvarado as well. Don't forget Alvarado. They've just done a series on the election in Brazil, and it was absolutely just out of this world. So if you need to learn about what's happened in Brazil, go there. We can drop links for you later.
Yeah, we'll do that. So follow all those on social media, and if you are able to, a little bit of a donation to us or to other people, or tell people to go and support Independent Media Association. We need to really do something because the state of our media at the moment is absolutely awful. We are trying to change that. We are trying to change that as part of something. We are regulated by Impress, which means that we cannot tell lies. We can have opinions, but we can't tell lies, which makes us very different to the mainstream media, which seem to be able to tell lies and then print a retraction on page 47. So we're a bit different to that. Earlier on as well, the correction about Food Bank Phil, that's the CEO of BT Openreach, apparently not the CEO of Royal Mail. So I got that one wrong. So immediate retraction there. So please do follow us on all our social media channels. And please do become a member of Socialist Think Tank at socialistthinktank.com. Listen to our podcasts. It's brilliant to hear that people have been catching up with them and listening to them on double speed. Jacqueline Hemmons, I believe, has been listening to everything on double speed. So I'm sorry our voices are so deep in real life. And hopefully we'll see you all soon. We'll see you next.
Thank you very much.
And look out for something very special as well that the Independent Media Association are going to be doing this week. I might as well break the news. We're going to have a look into what's going on in Haiti. So we're going to really push that this week, and that's going to be a massively important news story. And one final thing on Lula. Wasn't it interesting to see all the world leaders coming together, and especially those in the Labour Party? And Lula went and praised his comrade Jeremy Corbyn and thanked him for all the help. And the idea that Lula would not be allowed in the Labour Party is also quite a funny one. Anyway, have a lovely week, everyone. We'll see you soon. And thanks again. See you soon.
Bye.
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 We'll keep the red flag flying.